Great. All right.
So we can start with introductions just so that you all know who you're talking to, and then we'll let Amanda go ahead and get started on deadline chains. But hello, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're at. My name is Jasmine Knighton. I work here at Vine Skills as an optimizer, helping folks with Filevine and FBDA, and obviously free help getting you all trained and knowing more of the features in Filevine.
My name is Amanda. I am also an optimizer here at Vine Skills, and I, same thing, help people make the most of their Filevine system. So today I'm going to talk to you about deadline chains and task flow. Let me share my screen. And we can walk through building a deadline chain, using it, and we can talk through some task flow. But before we jump into the how, I want to talk a little about the why. So deadline chains are a way to keep track, of course, of deadlines that are upcoming in a project, but these work in a way that deadlines that communicate with each other. So it's not an ad hoc deadline necessarily. It's not just one deadline. It's maybe a trial, and that trial presents 5 or 6 other deadlines that need to be complied with in the litigation sense. In non-litigation type practices, maybe like personal injury or another type of practice, you can use deadline chains for other things, but most commonly I see them used for preparing for trial. Building them based off of scheduling orders is kind of the easiest way to imagine that. With these deadline chains that we build out, you have a whole lot of customization options. So you can create judicial calendars to tell Filevine how to calculate those days. Maybe you've got some judges who don't work the entire month of December or don't try cases the entire month of December. You could create a judicial calendar, which we'll talk about, to omit those days when doing these date calculations. You also have the ability to create customized reminder schedules. So when we use these deadline chains, they're going to add the deadline to your project calendar and to your Filevine calendar. But as those deadlines are approaching, they are going to give you activity feed reminders based on the reminder schedule that you designate. So you set up your reminder schedule in the advanced menu as well. And with that reminder schedule, you can assign different reminders to different deadlines. We'll walk through all of that, but that's a quick overview on the deadline chains. The other half of this is task flow. Task flow is a way to keep a case moving along without having to manually assign tasks to other teammates or users in the system. You have the option to set up roles for your firm. So if you've got specific roles, maybe paralegal, case manager, attorney, you can assign tasks to the person who has that role. So as long as people are setting up their teams, we can build tasks into phases. Maybe I move this from intake to case filed. There are some things I probably need to do for case management. Those tasks could live in this phase, and then moving to that phase will trigger a to-do list essentially. You can also build action buttons. So if there were tasks that needed to be done, but it's not in every case, not in every phase kind of checklist, you can program those into buttons that you then just push whenever you need them. And those tasks will be assigned to the role that you designate in the setup menu. So with that, I am going to jump into the main menu. Actually, first, I'm going to duplicate my tab so that I can have my project open in one while I'm working in the background. That's just a little Filevine tip from me about working in advanced menu. Always do 2 tabs if you can. So in my second tab, I'm going to navigate down to advanced. And deadline chains is where we will create that initial chain But the first thing I want to show you is that reminder schedule. So in your advanced menu, you can come into reminder schedules. I'll just choose my org here. And now you can see how we've set these up. Our default reminder schedule is telling us 14 days before the deadline, 7 days before, 3 days before, on the due date, and then 3 days after we get a little nudge that we missed it. Hopefully we never get to that point, but the Filevine default reminder schedule, it's not in here right now, but it is very, very large. So if you go into your org and you go to your main menu, go to your reminder schedule, you may see the Filevine default, which starts at 180 days and gives you a countdown. Once we hit 10 days, it's a everyday countdown. That's generally the default everyone's starting out with. But if you want to create a new reminder schedule, you'll just click on the plus sign. This is the Filevine default. You can see it's a little aggressive. Once we get past 10 days, we're getting that reminder every day. And then we get that reminder every day that we have missed the deadline until 180 days if we ever make it that far. But you can customize these in reminder schedules from the advanced menu. And if you don't want, maybe we didn't want the 180 days, we can just hit the X and remove that. Here you can type in custom numbers and choose if you want that to be before the due date or after the due date. I'm going to remove this schedule because we don't need it, but that is how you would create a new reminder schedule. Other thing I told you about was a judicial calendar. So in your judicial calendar, you can create a new one by clicking the plus symbol here. And if you see a date on the calendar that is beige, this means we're not taking that. This is a date we're skipping over. So we've got some holidays here, President's Day, we've got Independence Day. The holidays will generally be blocked out. But if you have a judge or a court who takes specific days off, you can come in and block those days out as well so that they're not being counted in your judicial calendar. Two little housekeeping items back here. Now I'll jump into deadline chains.
And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, if you all have any questions while Amanda's presenting, feel free to use the Q&A feature and we can get those answered for you. Sorry, Amanda.
Definitely, no problem. Thank you for that. So I'm going to create a new deadline chain here. I'm just going to make something up, so it may not make a lot of sense, but we'll build one out. From the deadline chain setup, I can click add new, and I just need to name it. I'm just going to call this test trial chain. Let's do that. So here it's asking me what I want my default calendar behavior to be. I'm going to stick with count every day, but that's where you could select, excuse me, a judicial calendar if you set up a specific one. And then we can add some notes here. This is just a test. Oh, I see a question. Oh, really quickly, I'm going to hit save here. There's a question on how to get to the advanced menu. So that is in the top left, those 3 horizontal lines. Some people call it the hamburger menu. In the main menu, advanced, if you are an org admin or an admin in your org, you will have this advanced options. If you don't have it, someone in your org could grant you those permissions, but it should be under setup in your main menu. Okay, I've created my test chain. I gave it a name, threw in a little note. This is just a test. We're counting every day. So here you will also see if you have set a specific calendar, that would be reflected here. I also have this little orange circle that is showing me that this chain is unpublished. This is in drafting mode. So as you're building out your deadline chains, by default, they are in this unpublished draft mode. And when you finish it, you can click the eyeball icon, and that will allow you to publish the chain so that it's visible in projects. But while we're building it out, while we're finalizing this, no one else can see it. It just lives back here in this setup. The first thing we want to do is add a deadline. So the first thing we're adding is actually our trigger date or our kickoff date. I like to note that in either the title or the notes, just so people are aware, but maybe my first thing will be trial. So here I'll just throw in asterisks or stars like trigger date, or this is your kickoff, but our trial date is what we're going to use to calculate all of those other due dates. So this is not going to be dependent on a deadline. I don't want to hide it in a calendar, but I can if I choose to. And then here you can set a specific reminder schedule. I probably don't need a lot of reminders before my trial, so I'm not going to assign a super aggressive one. I might just do that 30-day reminder so I know a month ahead, hey, trial's coming up. I'll hit save here, and now I can add in another deadline. This one I'm going to base off of that trial date. So maybe I need to, I don't know. Serve a notice. We can make this dependent on our trial being set. So our trial getting a due date will tell us we need to, actually, let's just say send, this is our last day to do something before trial. I'm going to say 60 days before our trial, we have our last day to do something. This one I can also assign a reminder schedule to, but this date is probably going to give me the opportunity to have more reminders. So I'm going to add in just the regular reminder schedule so that it tells me I've got 25 days to this deadline. All right, I'm going to add one more. So maybe once it's our last day to do XYZ, we have a final other thing. This is going to be dependent on last day being completed. So if I complete this, I have a new deadline. Maybe this is due 5 days, or let's say 15 days after this is done. So we've done this after, maybe it's an extension. After we file that extension, we have 15 days now to hit that initial deadline. I can set a reminder schedule here as well. I'm just going to use that same new reminder schedule and hit save. And when you close these out, so hit that little minus symbol, I can see all those deadlines listed out, my initial deadline, and then those subsequent deadlines that are calculating based off of this initial date. Here, since I've added everything I need to, I am going to click publish. And now when I go to my project, should be able to go into deadline chains and grab that test trial chain. Now you can see here our initial date. I'm going to assign this a due date of, let's say, July 7th. So we have a trial on July 7th, but before that, on May 8th, that's our last day to file something. Let's say we completed this on May 8th. That's going to populate that next deadline. Final day to do XYZ. That's going to be on May 23rd. So I see these here, but I also see these in my project calendar. So here you'll see that first deadline we created. It's got done in parentheses because we're saying we've already done it, but it's still here on the calendar. And then if I go to July, we'll see that trial date here. And when you click into these deadlines, if there were any notes added, you would see that here, but this is just showing me this was based on a deadline chain. So this is a deadline coming from a chain, and it's in this Michael Scott project. This isn't as important within the project itself because I know I'm in Michael Scott, but if I were in my main calendar, the one you can access here from your main menu, I could see these deadlines on that calendar as well. Let me just click on it and see. I'll click into deadlines. Oh, I'm not following that project. Little Filevine trivia. I am not a subscriber, so I won't see it on my main calendar. in order to see these deadlines on your calendar, or if you're syncing your calendars with Filevine, you do have to be a subscriber to see that outside of the project. Now, as long as you have access to the project, you'll see those deadlines on the project calendar. But if you want to see them anywhere else, you do have to be subscribed to the project. If you're not subscribed, which I am not, you can click into Vitals and click on Settings, and we'll just toggle on Subscribe to Activity. So now I'm going to give Filevine a couple minutes just to adjust to that. But when I go to this calendar and I click on my deadlines, we'll come back to this in a few minutes. I'll see those deadlines that I added on that trial chain. But you do have to be subscribed. Another thing we can do with these deadline chains is run multiple chains at once. So maybe I have my trial chain, but I've also created another deadline chain for mediation or for discovery. I can run those two deadline chains at the same time by clicking into enter chain name and then just selecting another one, from clicking the plus symbol and selecting another one from the list of chains that I have built out. You can switch between the two up here in this space bar. So I can see all the deadline chains that I have active in this project. And these are all going to reflect on that project calendar. So this is a better example without those fake titles. We've completed our first deadline. Our second deadline is due 15 days after this. And when we mark that one as complete, we may have a third deadline that populates. But the idea here is we have a really important date that has some to-do list attached to it that don't really work as tasks. It's something that we need to comply with, but everyone needs to know about this. This is not exclusive to one user. That's something I like to call out when we are talking about deadline chains and task flow, because yes, they both require some action. Both of these require work to be done in the project, but the task flow is a little more user specific. So me, the paralegal, I need to go make sure these tasks are done. But with these deadline chains, this is a little bit more broad. We have a discovery deadline. We have a trial date. We have a motion deadline. Everyone needs to know about those. Those are not things that should just live on my task list or on my activity feed, which is what happens with those task flows. So task flows, a lot more administrative. Deadline chains, big picture project. If you don't need one of these, or if you start one and maybe I start a trial chain, but something happens and the case ends up settling. We don't need to go to trial. I can go back to that test trial chain. I don't want to keep getting these reminders. So I'm just going to click the trash can icon. I'm going to remove this chain. It's going to take it off the calendar. It's going to stop sending me notifications in my feed that I've got some upcoming deadlines for this project. And it's going to keep my feed clean and keep that data accurate, because we're not going to trial in Michael Scott anymore, but maybe we're going to trial in Pam Beasley. So I need to see those. I don't want to have some deadlines mixed in that aren't important. We have a question. We have an issue where the notifications don't stop even though we trash a deadline chain. Interesting. I am not sure. Jasmine, have you seen that happen? I think that may be a good thing to bring up with Filevine support. That sounds like a notification issue. Close out the file.
And to get to Filevine support, for those of you that haven't reached out, or if there's like an issue that kind of seems a little weird, you can see their contact support. And then also if there's any like glitches or things that are kind of going weird, you can always check that status page to see if there's any ongoing incidents related to Filevine. It will kind of brief you and show you what's been going on. So that question mark will get you to some of those questions, but we haven't seen that where you trash it and it still shows up.
Yeah, it should. So there are a few other questions about deleting deadline chains. Will that retroactively remove reminders or deadlines from the calendar? No. If a deadline is done, I believe that done deadline stays. Now, the future deadlines, you shouldn't have to worry about that. Future notifications, future deadlines, when we remove that change, should not continue happening. If they do, that is a way, or excuse me, that is a support. Definitely contact support there.
So I think it's Eva is saying that any reminders that have been posted to the activity feed won't be deleted. That's correct. Filevine is designed to really not delete a ton of stuff, including most of the items in the activity feed. And so it may be that your whatever reminder schedule that you have set for that deadline chain is out to that like 180 days, 120 days past the due date. So that may be why you're still getting those, because that reminder schedule is still telling Filevine kind of, hey, we need updates about this. So that might be, that's an interesting caveat to deleting. But I haven't seen anybody run into that. We can definitely check in on that as well.
And since I deleted that chain, those dates are all gone. So if we remove the chain, everything's should be deleted with it. So 2 good questions. Is there a way to completely delete a litigation chain so that the fields don't show on reporting? Do you mean delete a deadline chain entirely or just from a project? So we can delete a deadline chain in the advanced menu. I'm actually going to delete this test one just by clicking remove. Oops, it's currently in use. Okay, it shouldn't be in use. Oops, have the chat open and my resources bar. I'm going to unpublish this so that it's not visible anymore. I'm going to grab that new chain here just to demo what you can do if your trial date changes. I saw that question come in as well. Okay. Can you, whoops, answered. Review how to remove a deadline chain based on trial date where trial date is changed. So if the trial date changes, we may not need to remove the deadline completely. See if this will trigger. No, this is based off of complete date. Because this one's based off of complete, if I say I completed this today, this deadline will be the 18th, but this date changes. Maybe I didn't actually do this. So I don't end up completing it until the 9th. I can click into this calendar and click on May 9th, and that will adjust the due dates or the calculations on those attached deadlines. Okay, yes, I'm going to answer this anonymous. So if you need to delete it completely, as you can see in advanced menu, if it's in use, we can't delete it, but you can unpublish it. So clicking that eyeball icon, right now it's published, it's got that green, it's online. If I want to remove this, I can click unpublish and that will hide it. If it hasn't been used, you should be able to delete it. There should be a trash can icon, but if it's in use and there's data there, we don't want to remove any of that, but you can unpublish it and it's not going to be visible going forward. All right, a lot of questions here. Yes. Patrice, yes. Removing the deadline chain removes the dates from the calendar. Okay. Can you complete all deadlines within a chain at one time, or do you have to do it one by one? Generally, these deadlines would be things that don't all happen at one time. If we're thinking in terms of maybe discovery, discovery deadline chain is one I've seen a lot where your discovery is served. So, you know, you've got 30 days to answer that discovery, but maybe 10 days before your answer, you want to review it with the client. But 5 days before that, you want the attorney to approve your draft. So we wouldn't be accomplishing all of those things at once. It's kind of designed that you've got that. Here's our upcoming deadline. Here are all the timeframes, or here's how to manage your time, because these are all your additional due dates. You can mark them all complete though. So if you do create one and you just want to mark all the deadlines complete, you can click this button right here, and that will mark that as complete. You'll see those dates on your calendar. So you can see when I've marked it complete, it's not touching that initial due date. It's just saying, okay, it's done. But when I go to my calendar, that due date didn't move to my complete date. It's just, it's been done, but it preserves the original due date on the calendar. If you close out the file with the reminders or deadline chain, stop sending notifications. I believe the answer is yes. When you archive a project, you should not continue getting notifications on those active deadline chains. Derek asked if there's a way to make the completed date appear on the calendar as well. I don't think so. The complete date will live here in the deadline chain section, but
You could add it to the notes. I mean, it wouldn't really calendar it for you, but you can see it when you click into that calendar invite.
yes. So if I add this to the notes, completed on 5/3, I'll save that note here. And then when I go back into the project calendar, when I click into that deadline, it will just show me that note, as Jasmine said, we can do completed on 5/3. So it was due on the 24th, but we've got that note here that it was completed on the 3rd. And then when we go to deadline chains, we'll see that as well. If you're subscribed to the project, you would see that on your main calendar too. All right. With that, I'm going to jump into Taskflow. So I'm back in our advanced menu, and Taskflow, all the way at the bottom, that's where we would manage or set up our tasks. But before we do that, let's talk about role setup. So in your role setup, you can create labels that correspond with the roles you have in your firm. So project primary is one, but we've got attorneys, we've got case managers, we've got case assistants. These are all things you can set up back here in your role setup, so that when we do go to Taskflow, we just choose our project type here. I'm going to choose personal injury, just so we can take a look at these. So in our personal injury task flow, I'm going to click phase as my initial trigger for these. Whoops, these are not built out. So what I'll do is I'll add some deadlines back here. In this first active phase, I can create an auto task. Maybe the first thing I need done is to confirm that we are taking the case. This is not going to be dependent on another task being complete. This will be dependent on the phase changing. So when the phase changes, or when the phase starts, when the project is open, we'll have an auto task letting us know that we need to confirm if we're going to take the case. So someone's called in, we created a potential new client folder or project file, and we're going to have this task pop up to remind us that we need to evaluate it. Here I can say, maybe I don't want the create date to be the day that we get that call. Maybe I want a little reminder 3 days later. Are we taking this case? Here I can say that this only creates when we're in that active or initial setup phase. I don't need this task in treatment or litigation. So this is only for this phase. And here is where I would assign it to the role. So by default, it's going to assign to the project primary, which is generally, if it's a brand new project, that's generally the person who opened the file. But maybe I want this to go to the case manager. So here I'll select case manager. I might want to notify the attorney. What this does, it doesn't call the attorney out in a task. It will show up on their feed, on their main feed. When this task is assigned, they would see a confirm that we are taking the case task has been assigned to the case manager, and they've got eyes on it. In some cases, you may need to track time. So if you're a firm that works on billing, hourly billing, you can add time tracking to tasks. This is a little more specific. So you would add your description. Maybe this is a task that tells you, call the client, give them a case update. If that's something you bill for, you can add that description here. So just case update. And enter in your suggested amount of hours. Maybe this is, we suggest billing half an hour for that case update task. You can add that here. I won't go into this too much, but you do have the option to change that. If you do add time tracking to this task and you initially suggest that should be half an hour, but you end up on the phone for a full hour, you can edit that. It's not locked in, it's just a starting point, but I'm not going to go down the billing rabbit hole here. It is an option if you're setting up those auto tasks to add time tracking to it. So I'll hit save here just so we can see that first task. Confirm we're taking the case. Now, once this has been completed, maybe we need to move into file setup. So what I'll do is add another task that is going to be when another task is complete. When confirm we are taking the case is completed, maybe we need to call client, get them a retainer, or make sure they've signed the contract. But maybe this is only if we're in the file setup phase. So I'm going to select that. Here you can set a due date. So if this task will be created when we mark the first task complete, but it doesn't have to be due that same day. Maybe it's due 5 days later, and maybe that one's going to the attorney. So here you can see the auto tasks that I have built into this active phase. And when I'm in the project and I change those phases, the tasks will pop up here on the activity feed. I don't think, let me remove this auto task. I'm going to remove these because I am not in a project to demo them for you. What I'm going to do, let's add in a task here. Okay, intake. I'm going to add a phase for mediation. I want this to be due immediately. So if we're moving the case into mediation, actually, maybe we don't have the mediation set yet. So I'm going to make this due 15 days after it's created, but it's going to populate as soon as I change the phase. This is not a task that I need to repeat because I'm not going to be sending this more than once the first time. And I'm going to keep it assigned to the primary. We'll hit save here. And now when I go back into my Michael Scott case, I can move us from intake to mediation, and you can see that task pops up right here. Send the notice to the client. It's going to Sarah, showing me my phase has been changed. But this is set for the 18th because I set this for 10 days later. I'm going to go ahead and mark that as complete. Go from there. So that's one way to assign tasks. You also have the option to create an action button that looks similar to this, like link to related projects. We could have tasks built into a button like this. So when you press the button, those tasks are assigned. It's not based on changing the phase. We can have a little more control over when we're initiating that. Any questions about task flow?
You may want to set a like auto task in your task flows as either an action button or a phase change for somebody to go in and do those deadline chains. So you know that they're getting done. You have an automated person to kind of go in and do those. So once a trial date is set, you can have a button maybe that says, make sure that this gets to, into a deadline chain and go that route. There's some cool things that you can do. It's good for reporting. You can report on those tasks to see what's been completed and what hasn't been completed to just help with your workflow as well.
Mm-hmm. Good call out there. Yes. Oh, okay. Good question. So if you have a task flow set up, maybe this is a button. We've built this as a button for ordering medical records. So you initiate the task flow, you click start task flow, those tasks populate, but maybe the records have already come in, as we see in the chat. It's a 35-day reminder, but you got the records at day 20 and you need to stop that task or complete the task. There is if you're completing the task and it's on a reminder and you don't want to go and complete it, or it hasn't populated yet, there should be a little X. I'm not sure if I have a action button one built out here. Okay, so we have a mediation one. Let's do this. When we push this button, it's created immediately and it's due in 35 days. All right, I'm going to go into our mediation section. I'm going to add an item here. And I'm going to trigger this task flow. So I've initiated the task flow, but I no longer need it. I don't want those tasks to keep populating or keep reminding me. I can just come in here and click reset. Now, resetting the task flow is not going to undo any tasks that have already been created. So you can see I should have a test task here. It's not going to mark that complete. It's not going to delete it. This is still an active task, but it will stop any further tasks from populating. So if you want to stop that or pause it as it's working, you can go in and you can just click reset on that task flow button, and that will stop any future tasks from populating, but it's not retroactive. So if there are open or active tasks, you do have to go complete those. Generally, if it's something I don't need, I mark it complete, and then I just make a little note here as to why I marked it complete and it wasn't done. Maybe something happened, but that's how you can do that. Each task flow button has a reset next to it, and you can just click that and it will untrigger itself.
I believe only admins have the ability to reset that button. So don't worry if, you're like,
what if you don't have it
them all the time. Yeah, or you don't have it. It's an admin permission, project level or wide. Hopefully that answered your question about kind of resetting that or eliminating that.
Yes, that is a very important thing. You do have to be a project admin to reset that, but it is an option. Great questions.
Are there other questions that you all had? that we could go over for you?
The time tracking feature in the task flow will allow you to start tracking time on that task. So let me see if I just add time tracking to this.
You do have to have time and billing turned on in order for you to be able to see that.
Yes, so you do have to have time and billing for this to be an option, but you can, I don't know, I'm just going to add a test description here. I'm going to say 0.5 is my suggested hours and save that. So when I come in here to the mediation section again, and I trigger this task flow, when I go to the activity, this is a billable and chargeable task for half an hour. When I click complete, it's just going to ask me to confirm that I want to bill for it, that it really is half an hour. I can edit the description, or if I'm not billing this for myself, maybe I'm billing this for the attorney, I can enter that in here as well. I can save it as a draft. I can remove it, but adding that time tracking option, if you have time and billing, just allows you to go and enter time for that task after you've completed it. So it's not going to track live. It's not going to initiate a timer while you're doing the task or anything like that. But when you do go in and mark the task as complete, you can add time tracking to it. Yes, so there is a question in the chat for creating a medical records task flow. If you need to create a task flow or to order medical records when treatment is complete, how do you do that? Is the button for each provider in medical. You would go into your advanced menu and add a button if it doesn't already exist in Customs Editor. And once that button is placed, you can program out those tasks. But just like in our mediation section, because this is a collection section, that button will exist in each individual medical provider's card. So you can initiate that task flow several different times for several different providers, in the same way that if I have multiple mediation scheduled, I can initiate that task flow for each instance of mediation. I hope that answered your question. If it didn't, I can go into more detail if there was a more specific thing you wanted to know, but in general, it would be in each of those medical provider cards in that collection section.
And another cool note with the task flows, you can add replacement fields similar to DocGens. So if you're wanting the task flow to like pull in the specific provider name or dates of service or anything like that, at the top, that task text question mark, the little question mark right above that text box will show you that you can use field selectors, and then it says replacement field list in blue. That's a hyperlink. If you click that, a list of replacement fields will populate for you to be able to kind of add into that task flow. So what I've seen folks do is maybe you write out a text message that you want sent, so that when somebody gets assigned that task, they just have to copy the text and paste it in, and it will already have, some of that info in there, or just so that you have the information, in your face. You don't have to try to guess the provider name, dates of service, or anything like that within the task flow, especially if you're calling somebody or need to communicate, instead of having to click into the project or into that individual where it was, triggered from, you can include that information in your tasks, so you can just do everything straight from your activity feed.
Yeah, that's a great thing to do, especially if you have multiple cases that you're working in. A lot of us multitask and we're doing lots of things at once. When you're in your task list, you'll see those things called out. So instead of saying, call the client, it will say, call Michael Scott, or request records from the hospital, request records from Grace Memorial. Great thing to do there. I'm gonna close out of here. Any other task flow questions? All right.
So we do have like a few more minutes. If you all do have questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A. If you all are currently just getting into Filevine, haven't gotten into Filevine, or have been using Filevine for a while, and you're looking for ways to optimize your usage or to really, again, just get started, Vine Skills does provide those kinds of services. So if you're looking for like a Vine Skills guru, lead docket, Outlaw, FEDA, all of those things, we can help your firm kind of optimize your Filevine, or again, get you started within Filevine, uploading a template. Because the system is so customizable, it gets overwhelming at some points. And so we kind of give a good starting point if you're launching, as far as a template, or can help you kind of, again, optimize or maximize your functionality within Filevine. Or if you're looking for somebody to build out deadline chains for you, we kind of offer those services as well on a month-to-month basis. So there's no need for like any contracts. I can drop in our website in case you guys would like to just read more about our services. We also do free help every Wednesday. The topics do change. I'm assuming that most of you probably got our newsletter, which has a ton of great content. There's additional videos on there for you guys to watch if you are still needing some more free assistance. We have a YouTube channel that houses some of our videos, and then some of our videos are on our website as well. And again, I'll drop that link here in the chat to you all. And then I can also leave my email address and Amanda's email address. That way, if you guys have any questions that come up, you can feel free to reach out, and we can definitely get those answered for you.
Yes. One more question in the chat. Two more questions. Is free help provided at the same time on Wednesdays? Yes. It is the same time every Wednesday. May not be the same face, but same time.
Yes, so it's usually myself and another optimizer coming on to kind of give you guys just an overview of either a specific product or functionality within Filevine, or there's the option for you all to like ask anything. So I know some folks come in and they're just like, I have questions. So we do provide those as well. I included the specific like link to the free help page. And that's where you can kind of go to either sign up to join our free help sessions. That way you're getting those reminders and emails. And then you can also see what the next couple of sessions will be for our free help.
Derek, I don't believe there's a way to link a calendar in the judicial calendar. It's just an option to manually create those, just those blackout dates.
And I do think you have to do judicial calendars each year. So if you like create it one year, next year, you'll have to go back in and kind of make some of those changes and adjustments. Some folks will do like specific judges have, you know, certain rules about kind of what their court allows or doesn't allow, or what days, things like that. And so you can go in and do those customized for judges, but you will have to do it yearly.
Yes.
Awesome. Any last minute questions before we kind of wrap up? We'll need a few seconds. Okay, awesome. It doesn't look like there's any questions. If you all do have questions, again, my email address and Amanda's email address are in the chat. Feel free to copy those before we hop off. That way you have that. Click into those links, learn more about Vine Skills, more about free help. And thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you, Amanda. You did amazing. Hopefully you will learn something.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good one.